John Fremont named it the Great Basin, 165,000 square miles. It extends all the way from the Sierra Nevada in California to the Cascades in Oregon, and then over to the Wasatch Mountains in Utah. Then goes almost all the way to the Colorado River. Nearly all of Nevada is in the Great Basin. Scientifically, it's called the hydrographic Great Basin because all of the precipitation that falls into this vast area goes to no ocean. 20,000 years ago, glacier melt-off created all kinds of new rivers and streams in this area, and eventually that resulted in Lake Bonneville. And Lake Bonneville was almost an ocean. It covered 20,000 square miles. And in the bottom of Lake Bonneville, water was dripping into an underground aquifer for thousands and thousands of years. Now Lake Bonneville's gone, but the aquifer is still there and the water is still there. The problem is they don't really know how much water is in the Great Basin aquifer. And now Las Vegas wants that water. And they need it for future growth. How are they going to get it? They're going to extend a pipeline from eastern Nevada, the Great Basin here, all the way to Las Vegas. They say they can do it without creating problems and without drawing down the aquifer. Many other people disagree. They think it'll be an environmental catastrophe.
We spoke with locals most likely to be impacted by the pipeline. Dean Baker has been one of the most vocal ranchers against it. Starting with his father, it has taken Dean and his 3 sons over half a century to build their Snake Valley Ranch into the operation it is today. Baker Ranches now raises and irrigates a variety of crops, including alfalfa, corn, oats, barley, and wheat. Some is sold and some feeds their substantial cattle herd.
This is always nice for me to look out the window of the vehicle and see this nice, productive grass and meadow that we've created here.
So in some respect, the water here already is benefiting in Las Vegas.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, whether it's the milk they drink, the cheese they eat, all of the other dairy products they use, whether it's...
So why can Las Vegas stake claim on water 300 miles away? Nevada water law guards groundwater as well as surface streams from just being taken and moved elsewhere by the highest bidder. Southern Nevada Water Authority may have overcome that hurdle by essentially buying the rights to the water by buying nearly all the ranches in Spring Valley.
Once they had 2 or 3 places, then the ones around them knew, well, we're going to be surrounded by them pumping the water down, and so we can't maintain ours. We better get the money and go someplace else, which is essentially what all of them did.
Pat Mulroy is charged with ensuring that Nevada's economic engine, Las Vegas, has enough water.
But over the last 10 years, the issue hasn't been, or in the last several years anyway, the issue hasn't been growth, it's been survival. Can this community survive?
Between the years 2000 and 2010, we had the 11 driest years in the recorded history of the Colorado River. Those 11 years on average gave us 69% of average hydrology and resulted in Lake Mead declining approximately 140 feet in elevation because 90% of the Las Vegas Valley's water supply comes.
The shoreline white ring shows the depth of the lake's decline.
We could actually lose the capability to take water out of the lake. That was obviously a situation of the utmost concern.
We have to assume that the worst is possible. If we don't, we will not have the time to make the necessary corrections when that day comes.
This draft environmental impact statement was created by the BLM over a 6-year period. The National Environmental Protection Act requires that a EIS be prepared on projects of this size. Kind of looks like the Size of the project dictates the size of the study.
This study actually does a pretty good job at predicting the overall drawdown. It shows really devastating impacts of this project. It needs to be emphasized more and more, just how much drawdown that we're talking about. I mean, there are areas under their proposed action of drawdown over broad areas that's over 200 feet. Very large areas where the drawdown is over 100 feet, and that takes the water table below the root zone of all of the wetland plants that are out there. Southern Nevada Water Authority is proposing to take up to an amount equal to the entire recharge in the valley, and in Spring Valley they're asking for about 20% more than what the recharge is. But they do that, they lower the water table, and all of a sudden you have both the natural discharge and the pumping pulling from the water, but only the recharge going back in, so you're creating a huge deficit.
See, people don't understand that there is a connection between groundwater and surface water. The two are intricately connected. You just don't have this infinite amount of water that's captured in the groundwater in this subterranean cavern somewhere. It's all connected.
Gary Perea, general manager of the Border Inn, is also a White Pine County commissioner. A huge display depicting the size of the proposed pipeline sits in front of the property.
They, in essence, close these basins to development. Because they have a seniority right to that water, somebody that wants to come along and maybe put in a farm or increase their agricultural use or whatever, they're not allowed to. They would have to get Southern Nevada Water Authority's approval to be able to drill for that water.
Las Vegas is concerned about its own economic consequences of limited water.
During the entire 12 years of this drought, especially from 2005 on, I probably spent a significant portion of my time talking to Wall Street investors, to Wall Street analysts, to talking to international investors, be they from Dubai, be they from Saudi Arabia, be they from Asia, be they from Europe, wanting to know, what are you going to do? How are you going to guarantee, create water security?
Some believe investing in Las Vegas for more growth isn't sustainable when it's already grown beyond its resources. There are no people who have relied on Great Basin water longer than the Native Americans, whose tribal lands straddle the Nevada-Utah border directly over the Great Basin aquifer.
Well, as a native, we have a totally different concept of water and nature than our regular populace. To us, water is sacred, and it flows from the Earth Mother's breast, something precious to be protected. Sorry about that, but I feel really strongly on that. And to waste water the way that our present society is going, and we feel is just totally against our beliefs in life, and the earth is our parent.
Over 25 animal species and 9 plant species are listed as endangered or threatened in Nevada. Nearly all would be impacted by a drawdown of the water table in eastern Nevada.
I think there have been claims made that this project will cause the extinction of any number of species across the Great Basin and into the Mojave Desert. And I can say with certainty that SNWA will not be allowed to cause the extinction of any species, nor do we wish to cause the extinction of any species. And the BLM also has a legal responsibility to manage those species. And so there is much oversight of SNWA and its actions that would avoid causing extinction to species across the landscape.
We do not believe this is a sustainable project. It reminds us too closely of what happened to Owens Valley back in the beginning of the last century. And we do not believe that there are sufficient environmental regulations and protections in place to prevent what the BLM's environmental impact statement is showing as a massive groundwater mining project.
One of the more interesting dynamics of this situation is an uneasy alliance between ranchers and environmental groups. Both groups have separate reasons for opposing the pipeline project. One to protect their very existence, the other to protect the environment. Representatives of both have joined forces under the Reno-based Great Basin Water Network to oppose the pipeline. Many environmental groups have traditionally opposed livestock grazing by ranches on public lands and have filed hundreds of lawsuits over the years against the BLM, often under the Endangered Species Act, to reduce or end grazing on public land.
It sounds to me like they're going to dry things up. Let them take it out of Lake Mead.
Well, they're taking water out of Lake Mead now, and they say they don't have enough.
Well, that shouldn't be our worry, should it?
Pahranagat Wildlife Refuge is also along the path of the pipeline.
We're here to manage migratory birds. The refuge was established in 1963 as a migratory bird sanctuary, essentially. It's basically a migratory bird sanctuary because we have, as you notice behind me, a bunch of water. And that water comes from 2 or 3 springs that basically feed the entire valley.
Now, is this warm water that comes up in here, or?
At Crystal and Ash Springs, they are thermal springs, they are warm springs.
Another area where surface waters come from deep underground. It's unknown how they may be affected by pumping from the aquifer. Only 40 miles from Las Vegas, Coyote Springs, 42,000 acres, was projected to be the site of over 100,000 homes in a planned community with up to 16 golf courses.
An 18-hole golf course designed by Jack Nicklaus is actually now in play. But in 2009, the economy tanked, and the housing development itself was put on hold indefinitely. Now, most real estate experts say that Coyote Springs will eventually happen.
But for it to grow to full capacity, it may need to tap into the pipeline that's going right by their front door here on Highway 93. Many who oppose the project are asking, even if Las Vegas gets this water, what happens if future growth makes them dependent on it?
They're effectively conducting a large experiment. And the question is, there is nothing that can be done to protect these springs once the drawdown begins to affect them, because they would have removed so much water from storage already. The water tables would start coming down. The springs in the park would be dry for a very long time before nature could recover them, if they ever had the willpower to stop pumping.
Southern Nevada Water Authority says they will pump different wells at different times.
And when we can take all we need from the Colorado River, we will. It will still be our primary source of supply, and those basins will rest.
So are there alternatives to building a $15 billion pipeline? Some propose that Southern Nevada Water Authority should help California develop desalination plants in exchange for more water from the Colorado River that's already running right by Las Vegas's front door. One desal plant can produce up to 50,000 acre-feet of water and cost up to $1 billion. So 4 of these plants would provide more water than the proposed pipeline would. Mike Dunbar with the South Coast Water District feels California needs to make desalination a priority.
The ocean will not run out of water. The technology is there. They're doing it all over the world. There are 15,000 ocean plants in the world. There's like half a dozen in the US. What's wrong with that picture?
Hala Razik with the San Diego Water Authority described the difficulty of getting just one desalination plant built.
Looking at desalination has been something that we've been engaged in for quite some time. We are right now in negotiations with Poseidon to have them start building a plant. The process from when we initially considered desalination in that location until today has been 18 years. And the process has been fraught with lots of controversy, litigation, on and on.
Pat Mulroy explains that this kind of exchange, even if it could happen, still keeps them dependent on the Colorado River, which is losing more water due to growing demand in the upper basin states, taking more of their allocation, as well as scientists predicting the flow could be reduced another 10 to 20% in the coming decades due to climate change. Her thoughts on the challenges of desalination.
It can't be a plan B when there's nothing in the Colorado River. I don't understand why nobody wants to get their head around this issue. When Lake Mead hits elevation 1,000, there is less than 5 million acre-feet left in a reservoir that has 26 million acre-feet of capacity and an annual demand of 9.5 million. Everyone will be cut back to bare bones. And we've invested, ourselves, Met, and the Central Arizona Water Conservancy jointly funded a feasibility study for a desalter in Rosarita Beach. It's a 50,000 acre-foot desalter. It will be a part of our water resource one day, but our planning is about what happens when the real huge drought hits and we see the real consequences of climate change befall this river system.
Apparently, all the agencies within Southern California's Metropolitan Water District would have to agree to help Nevada.
I don't think that it's all Southern Nevada hasn't looked at it. I think that Southern California has probably been a stumbling block. Southern California needs to step up and say, okay, we're willing to discuss this with you.
Joe Geaver of the Surfrider Foundation also wants the water we already have used more efficiently.
With our stormwater programs and concreting all our rivers and all the stormwater infrastructure that forces fresh water off the land as fast as you can, and our wastewater treatment facilities forcing water off the land as fast as they possibly can. And then when we're faced with some water scarcity, our solution is to pump it out of the ocean and take the salt out at huge energy demands and killing marine life along. We call that the cycle of insanity. Quit pumping it off the land in the first place.
Has Las Vegas done enough to conserve its own water? During the last decade, even though the population has increased by 400,000, annual water consumption is still 98,000 acre-feet below the 2002 level.
Well, you have to understand, first of all, we have the most aggressive water conservation program in the entire United States. Everything that hits a sewer system is reused and brought back a second time, if not a third time through.
All the water in all the toilets is recycled, so then you're going to build 6 more casinos that have 5,000 rooms each, and I don't care if you're recycling the water in the toilets. Where's the water for 30,000 more toilets going to come from? They have to stop. They just have to stop.
As a national policy, this country needs to really think about, food production. We're one of the few countries now that grows enough food to feed its own population. up in northern Nevada, southern Utah. Huge ranching operation. You know, we have to preserve that. We can't keep just building buildings. We can't just keep paving over things.
It's getting hard to be in the ranching business, isn't it?
It's very hard to be in the ranching business, to stay in the ranching business. Yeah, and it's just heartbreaking to know that it took 5 lifetimes to make our ranch what it is, and in a period of 1/2 decade we could lose it all.
So who really is the endangered species in this water scenario? Is it Nevada's rural communities? Our remaining Native American tribes? Or those who manage our land to provide us with food? Or is it Las Vegas?